Cool. All right. Yeah, how have you been then?
Yeah, pretty stressed. I did my first ever talk at a university the other day, which was I don't know, it's kind of scary. And also my real job is pretty stressful at the moment, so it was all adding up, and I had a weekend where I basically did nothing apart from play the new Pokemon game, which was fun.
Okay.
But now I'm feeling all right. How are you?
Cool. Yeah, I'm all right. Yeah, not really done that much recently, but yeah, a lot of script writing and stuff behind the scenes. So yeah, it's cool.
Okay.
Um, what were you talking about at university? That's quite a big step.
Yeah, it is. So it was an interesting build up to it as well. So the University of Warwick, which is one of the like fancy bigger ones in the UK, for anyone who's not from the UK watching, um, they one of their student societies has some science society, and they have people to come in and talk about science. And they asked if I wanted to come in and talk about what I know about, but like make it sciencey. So I did a presentation on combating hatred and the science behind it. So I did some science on how your brain is affected by abuse, and then on where hatred and like prejudice comes from, and then lastly on like how to stop it and what's effective combating it. Um, but I announced this talk the first time round, and then there was such a pushback online from all the gender criticals, and I got loads of hate, and also so did
Oh,
the university and the people involved. That the university actually had to basically cancel it because they didn't have time to prepare security. So my talk on hate got cancelled by hate, and then they rescheduled it for last Friday. No one up and did it, and we didn't get any hate, but we did have two security guards, which seemed really unnecessary because there wasn't. It was like it was just a nice talk with a load of LGBT people turned up with like little flags and stuff, and then yeah, it was good. I think it went quite well. I'm pretty pleased. I might be speaking at this isn't an official announcement. I'm still in negotiations, but maybe Bristol, UE, Cambridge, and Edinburgh. So
wow.
yeah,
So that's the start of something kind of new then. Wow. Like,
yeah, I'm quite enjoying it. So should
does
be
it feel
cool.
quite important to have two security guards for your event?
Yeah, so we were in this like absolutely giant lecture room, and it had like this huge screens. They had like fold back screens and everything, so you could see what you were doing. And
Okay.
they had like I had a little lapel microphone and everything. It was super professional. And then yeah, and the security and everything. And then yeah, it was definitely a different experience to YouTube.
Yeah. Um, yeah. Are the other ones you're doing on the same topic, or are they different subjects?
Well, I wanted so I the student society invited me, and I wanted to just do what they suggested. But like for the other ones, it's more like the universities and LGBT groups and stuff. And also, I wanted to see if I'd be good at it. So I picked something like, in my mind, it was not controversial. I mean, saying like Nazis are bad, how do we stop Nazis?
Hmm.
I mean, that is controversial in gender critical land, but I thought it was fine. But I'd love to do some talks on like what is the gender critical movement, and why is it horrific, and why is it like why is like a good talk would be why genocide isn't a massive over exaggeration
Okay.
as a term. So
Wait, well,
which
I
I
can't
know is
imagine why you'd bring that up, but okay.
it'd be a good talk to have, but it'd be
Yeah.
way more controversial. I'd love to do it at Cambridge because Helen Joyce just talking completely unrelated, nothing to do with what I'm about to say, but talking of genocide,
Hmm.
Cambridge just hosted some gender critical people, and
Oh.
it would be good to do a talk about them because they would fucking hate that.
Yeah, because I always feel like they're just so much more plugged into like the hierarchy of society and all that. Like, yeah, they got a lot
Yeah,
more privileges.
absolutely. I mean,
Um, yeah, sorry.
yeah. Sorry, you picked one of my rant buttons. Uh, Dr. Kathleen Stock, who is she used to be a lecturer at Sussex teaching philosophy of art, but now isn't. She got an OBE or an MBE, one of those two, for services to education. She's done like nothing. It's just because, like you said, plugged into the hierarchy.
Hmm.
She's just a right wing person who was prepared to stand up against the trans menace, and got literally like one of the highest awards in the country for effectively doing nothing. So apart from coding some extremism. But anyway, yeah. Sorry, go on.
Wow. Yeah, because I feel like this is like really different from yesterday because I was talking to What the Trans yesterday.
Oh yeah.
And I noticed that their whole thing is very much that they create content for other trans people. Like they don't really engage that much with the right and like the anti-trans people. But I feel like you are the complete opposite. Like I always known you as the person who goes right into the thick of it and fights with transphobes and on the internet or on call-in shows and that kind of thing. Um, how did you end up there? How did you start with that?
I like arguing. Argument, like not pointless arguing. I like discussing ideas and stuff, and like disagreeing with people over stuff. I don't just like causing pointless arguments for no reason. But I used to argue a lot about atheism when I was an insecure teenager atheist. Um, and also I just like facts and stuff. Like sometimes people say something, they'll just mention like, "Oh look, there's a woodlouse," and I'm like, "I have about 25 woodlouse facts. Let's go," and I'll just list them off because it's it's just something to talk about. It's cool. And so when someone says something about trans people and it's wrong, I just feel like one of those reply guys, and I'm like, well, actually,
Yeah.
and there's so much misinformation about trans people that you get someone to be like a classic gender critical talking point that they're all saying at the moment is trans people are the safest demographic in the UK. And I'd be like, well, actually, that's a load of bullshit. And here's all the statistics and here's why it's, this is where it's come from. And so I just like doing that. But so that's one of my drivers. And my other one is that I feel like it is pretty serious at the moment for trans people in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to, I don't, so I'm in a very privileged position where I generally fit into society. I don't get much abuse or any. I have a good job. I've got friends and family who support me, and I could just like disappear really. But if I did that, and then they came and took our rights away, I would feel like why didn't I do something? Like this is the moment in history when I should be doing something about this, and I just couldn't live with myself if I just did nothing. And I know I've got the skills and the resources to do something. So those two things, like my joy of the argument and my desperation for my future, are my two things. But I just made a Twitter. Oh, I already had a Twitter from my old name, but I made a new Twitter and just started disagreeing with people. And then I just carried on doing that, and I just got to 80,000 followers just by being a bellend, really.
I mean, how else do you grow on Twitter, though, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. But I feel like I've been consistently a bellend. I feel like some other people with my size following, they are either already famous or they've had some like massive breakthrough moment. Not saying that either of those things are inferior. I think they're probably both superior. If you do something really special, like Keffels, for example, she, obviously people really like her for what she does, or some people don't like her for what she does, but she smashed through, like came out of nowhere and as like a celebrity now. I haven't had that moment. I've just consistently kept being a dickhead every single day for 6 years solid.
Yeah.
So,
So it was just like this kind of like organic growth from just arguing and getting retweeted and yeah, okay.
Yeah. And just slowly making friends with people on the way and stuff.
Yeah, cool. How did the cartoons become a thing? I've got one on my screen right now covering your face, unfortunately. But yeah, it's I've always enjoyed these because I think they summarize things. Yeah, there you go. That's stay like that. Okay, so yeah, the way that they work is like really just I feel like they summarize things so well. And like I'm always a really big fan of keeping things like short. Like I think if there's a complicated idea, like just do your best to make it explainable to like a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
And
so
like,
that's
yeah, sorry.
So I was just gonna say that's one of my main motivations is that like I just and again not trying to say that I'm better or worse than anyone for this, but I like things that are just you just say them like they are, and not in a kind of like right wing Donald Trump. Oh, just say what is just a man in a dress, but like to just try and be as direct as possible, and explain things to people. And I think I'm quite good at explaining things to people, so that's kind of what I focus on, and yeah, I I don't know, with the cartoons, often I just kind of like see this idea, and it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to start a cartoon site. What are some ideas? It's more that often I'm just like, I need to express this thing I'm thinking of in a way, and I'll either write it down, but sometimes it's just best shown in a picture. So I was like, no one's gonna fucking like these. They're garbage. Like it's literally they called it Katy shit cartoons because
Mm.
they are, look at it. It's like the worst rip off of XKCD you've ever seen. Um, and so I was just like, well, I'll just put them somewhere because I want to keep these and I delete all my old tweets. So I just made a new Twitter for them, and now suddenly it's like closing in on 30,000 followers. Though Twitter's dead now, so whatever. But
So
I've
I've heard,
moved over
yeah.
to Mastodon. So. But yeah, I don't know. I quite enjoy them, and I find them quite easy to come up with. Like whenever a new thing happens, which is all the time, whenever there's a new gender critical bullshit, I just get inspired to do a cartoon. I've got one in my mind for Stephen Fry, and I've got one in my mind for this recent shooting thing. I just haven't had time to do them.
Yeah, I don't. What's happened with Stephen Fry lately? I haven't kept up with him, but is he kind of lost it again, or?
No, he's basically trying to be the why can't everyone just be nice? And
Mm.
he's obviously friends with J.K. Rowling, and he's obviously friends with some LGBT people. I mean, he's gay himself, but he's obviously friends with some trans people. And he was like, "Oh, my trans and intersex friends are so upset, but I know J.K. Rowling isn't a horrible person. I know that she doesn't want to hurt people. Really, I just wish everyone would get on." It's like, fuck off. Like,
Mm.
I just feel like I just have no respect for people like that who J.K. Rowling and her crew that she's constantly promoting are calling to just completely gut all trans rights from in their entirety from this country.
Mm.
And then you say this is disgusting, and then he's like, "Oh no, don't be horrible to each other." And it's just a way of like, protecting abusers, really. And so, yeah, I kind of lost respect for him for that because it was just whiny. And it was in the Daily Mail as well. So it's like going whining to the Daily Mail about how trans people are horrible to their
Yeah.
oppressors is just pathetic. Um,
Yeah, it's like because I feel like the gender critical side are
Remember the
so,
Holodomor?
especially like what's her fucking Kathleen Stalker, like J.K. Rowling,
mm.
are so good at just like clearly just trolling all the way through their mentions or their DMs to find the most horrific like death threat from a trans person and just blow that up and be like, this is what they're all like. And yeah, it's really
Well,
um
usually the most horrific throwaway comment from some anonymous account, which is probably from 4chan and is
mm,
almost certainly a cis man age 17, and whether she's ever, like J.K. Rowling's ever got one from a trans person, I think we don't know.
yeah, because it's always like avatars, right? Like usually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and like, what would if you were some like want to cause as much harm to other people, like 4chan shithead? I mean, one of the easiest things you could do is make a fake trans account and send a death threat to one of like Matt Walsh or J.K. Rowling or something. Like that's just win-win-win, isn't it? Like you don't care about them, you don't care about trans people. Everyone will get in a big flap about it.
Well, that's what they do, isn't it? 4chan, like
Yeah,
they've said openly that they do like operations to make like LGBT people look bad. Yeah.
yeah, and you see them because like they write in this way that's like, I mean, maybe even it would fool some LGBT people, but there's just this way where it's like they have this view of LGBT people, and they know if they just wrote that, then everyone would be onto it because they're like, oh, if I said, oh, I'm a degenerate loser, like come talk to me, then we'd all flag it. So instead, they
Mm-hmm.
write it in a way where they think they're just like sugarcoating all of that. So they'll be like, oh, hello, my fellow fetish enjoyers, like let's all go and do a sexy dance in front of children, and like they're trying to hide it, but they don't really know. They don't realize that it's still just built on stereotype bullshit. So some of them are better than others, but you can always tell. You can't always tell because you wouldn't know when you couldn't tell, but there are lots of them doing it.
Yeah. Um, I've always we come back to like especially the state of things in the UK or the US now, and yeah, like you said, a lot of people just trying to remove like as many rights as possible.
Yeah.
I feel like from the outside, it looks like you've got like two sides of it. Like on the one hand, you've got this like explosion of trans visibility and acceptance, especially in the last 15 years. Like I still remember in school when like even if you knew any trans people at all, like the noun you would use for them was the T slur. That was just the default
Mm.
word for them. That you didn't even know what it was short for half the time. But then so obviously that's like come on quite a long way, and like like higher numbers of kids on puberty blockers and all that. But then on the other hand, I guess is like as well as the acceptance grows, so does the like the scrutiny, right? Like so now I
Mm,
like trans people across like Europe and America are just like under a like a magnifying glass all the time, and the backlash and like the right wing are just paying so much more attention to them. Um, I guess in the way of like when you think about social progress, or like is it possible to view it as like progression, or is there just like how do you kind of like square those two
yeah.
things?
Um, because I think that there's different types of I could call it power in this sense, in that um the like you say, with more visibility, is it's like a double-edged sword, and you get more pushback and more support. And I think it'd be true to say that never before in history, or never before, at least in like the recent era of Western society, has there been more explicit support for trans people from cis people. I mean, there are, groups of cis people who go out of their way to say they support trans rights now, and when would that have ever happened before? It
Mm,
just wouldn't have happened. And then equally, now we also have reactionaries realizing that their sort of dominance over trans people is under threat, so they're going out of their way to cause as much harm as they can. But I think when I look at it, I often think of it like the people in political power, and like the people in control of newspapers and the media and stuff, they are anti-trans, and they've never been more anti-trans. Like even in the 80s and 90s, when they were ripping on gay people and trans people, like outing trans people and ruining their life was like a sport for the British media.
mm,
Even then, it wasn't like a focus. It wasn't something they did all the time. Like the British media post had a point recently this year where they were posting like 35 anti-trans articles a day.
mm.
Like even in the peak of the gay panic, there wasn't even close to that about trans people. So all of that's worse than ever. But that's only one type of power, and another is kind of social acceptance. And sure, there's a load of gender critical cultists and Republican knobheads and stuff, but they're teaching about trans people in schools now, and that's just children know what trans people are, and they're just like cool with it. And like there's more LGBT people in Gen Z or whatever than there's ever been out LGBT people. And just that kind of stuff I just feel like is unstoppable. Like as much as many rights as they take away, in the long term, in the scope of like 100 years, this more supportive than ever generation now, they're going to be adults at one point. They're going to be the ones in charge at one point. And sure, they'll have their own conservative bullshit, but when it comes to trans people, they would have grown up where it's just normal. Like, trans people on the TV, number one in the charts for the last 2 weeks or something has been two trans people. Like just as there's kids like this. Kids will be listening to like Kim Petras songs and stuff, and
Mm.
just being like, "Oh yeah, she's not just normal," and then it's gonna be like, "Oh, well, we're taking away her right to live." They were like, "What the fuck is this?" So I feel like when you look at the polls, generally most people in the UK support trans rights in some form or other, um, and that's where I get all my hope from. I think because if we were like still in a Section 28 days,
Yeah.
and support for people, trans people, was worsening, and with had all the power, and it's like, oh, the most transphobic generation ever is Gen Z, then it'd be like, man, we're fucked.
Mm.
So yeah,
That is a very hopium answer. So yeah,
yeah, yeah.
despite the state of things. Um, I mean, despite that though, as well, like you mentioned this the last time I was talking to we were on that panel with the Surfs and was it Kevin Logan?
Mm,
Um, and when you said it, I just like I hadn't clicked for me that it's something I hear a lot all the time as well. I spend a lot of time focusing on American politics. That's where most of my audience is and where all
yeah.
the discourse is, like in streamer circles. But it kind of made me forget about the UK. And like yeah, like you said, I think you said something about how you or like most of your trans friends have like kind of decided that they've got their own personal line in the sand for when it
Mm,
might be time to maybe like come to Scotland instead or something where it's a bit
mm,
different. And I think I heard that from people yesterday as well. Um, um, what is it? What's the state? Because I know a lot about like the bills in the U.S. right now, but what's the state of things in England right now? Like, if you had to summarize, like maybe like two or
Yeah.
three things.
So, I mean, generally, as far as countries go, the UK is still, uh, on paper and in practice, one of the safest countries in the world to be a trans person. And I think, although we've got this reputation of being TERF Island and stuff, we do have good trans rights all around. So there's a European ranking of LGBT rights by who's that by? Bummer, I've forgotten the name of the organization now. But the UK used to be number one, and it's now number 14, which is showing it slipping and things are getting worse, etc. But we're still 14th best in Europe, which is like, as far as continents go, probably the best one, to be a trans person in terms of rights. Our murder rate here is very low, violence rate's very low in general. Now that is kind of the background to hate crimes are rising. Hate crimes here this year have gone up over 50%. They've gone up over 2,000% since the Tories got in power. And apparently, according to Stonewall, this year 41% of all trans people in the UK have experienced a hate crime, which is that's a horrific number. But yeah, in terms of so that's like one part of it. There's the rising trans panic, and that always is going to come with violence, and that's similar to in the US. That we're seeing more attacks on LGBT people in the US. In terms of laws, the Theresa May's government had the David Cameron government energy of David Cameron passed gay marriage, and the Conservatives, I think, probably just saw it as like an easy win to say, oh, we're not the bad guys, we're just ruining poor people's lives. And then when that kind of changed to the Boris government, I think they were all about culture wars, and they were seeing the culture war stuff going on in the USA. I don't know, whatever caused it to change, they started to attack trans rights, basically. So the first thing they did was drop any reforms. So we were expecting a Gender Recognition Act reform, which is some minor thing which affects your birth certificate, death certificate, marriage certificate, that kind of stuff. And also a ban on conversion therapy. And they've basically been halted. But and that was kind of the Boris government position. And Liz Truss didn't do anything, obviously. But the Rishi Sunak one is even more extreme and more culture war. And he has signaled that he wants to review the Equality Act with the goal of basically removing trans people from the Equality Act. And the gender critical movement, which is I think they aim to be like on the Overton window, just one like step away from the center of where the political power is at that moment. So for the whole of the Boris government, they were campaigning to get the Gender Recognition Act the Gender Recognition Act reform dropped, and the conversion therapy ban dropped, and they kind of succeeded that. And as soon as that's happened, they've moved to repeal the GRA, the Gender Recognition Act, and change the Equality Act. So that's where they're trying to drag the Conservatives over to now. And Rishi Sunak has kind of signaled support for that. If that was to happen, if they somehow managed to reform the Equality Act to remove trans rights, it would be pretty horrific. It would mean like the Equality Act is what stops us from being fired for being trans or being denied healthcare and all of that kind of stuff. And it's also would give protections from misogyny for similar reasons for both trans women and trans men. So that would be pretty dark. It also, so that's one thing, but the chance of that happening, I think, is quite low for a number of reasons. And one is that the reason we have the Equality Act and the Gender Recognition the Gender Recognition Act, sorry, those two laws, is so we can fit in with the European Court of Human Rights rulings. So the UK lost in court to the European Court of Human Rights, and that's kind of why we have trans rights. So if they were just going to get rid of them, then it would just go to court again, and they would just lose again, and they would have to change it. So that's as long as we don't leave the European Court of Human Rights.
Yeah, because we are still there. It's separate. It's separate from Brexit, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's separate thing. It's also something that Churchill came up with. So I feel like that's something that we should point out when right wingers are going for it. Like, do you hate Churchill?
Yeah.
Yeah. He came up with this to stop the Nazis, actually. So maybe you shouldn't be getting rid of it. But so that's like one thing on the legislative side that kind of stops that. I guess it'd be very difficult for them to take out the equality. I mean, it's just fucking garbage. You just have to tear up so much human rights legislation, in order to like achieve something like that. But then the other main thing, sorry, it's a really long answer. The other main issue in the UK is healthcare. And trans healthcare in the UK is absolutely just broken. I don't know if I haven't watched Abigail Thorne from Philosophy Tube's newest video yet, but apparently it's really good and covers healthcare for trans people in the UK. And it's just like the waiting lists are effectively infinite. I mean, they're growing at like some of these waiting lists are growing like hundreds of people, a year, and some of them are seeing like one patient a month, and there's just no way around that. And some of the waiting lists are already over 10 years in some places. 10 years to see health, like to get healthcare to carry on with your life, it's just, prohibitive to live a normal life. And alongside that, so that's for adults, and then for children, the NHS has just rolled out some new provisional bullshit where basically they want to stop. There's some people in the NHS who want to stop healthcare for trans kids and want to drop all of the international guidelines. And so that's also where they're moving to, and that's another conservative thing. So yeah, that's kind of stressful. So the main attack points are for the anti-trans people is they're coming for our legal protections, they're coming for our healthcare, and they also want a new Section 28, which is banning talking about trans people in schools. So that's kind of where our battle lines are at the moment.
Are they having any success with the Section 28 thing at the moment, or how's that
well, no, I don't think they are. There's a lot of the newspapers, trying to make a fuss, and I think that the gender critical, this term that I learned recently, lawfare, some Alliance Defending Freedom thing where they pick strategic court cases to try and chip away at things really like slowly. They're trying to look for something to do with that. They want a teacher who is reprimanded for abusing a trans kid who they can get legal protections for, or they want someone who refuses to teach about LGBT people in school to get their rights defended in court. To be a prick, rights to be a prick. So they haven't got anything like moving on this that I'm aware of at the moment. I'm sure they will soon. But another thing is, I think that lots of people are expecting Kemi Badenoch to be put into education minister, and she isn't. And as far as we can tell, or the last I heard, that the one that did get put in, it has said pro-trans things in the past. That doesn't really mean anything with conservatives because they're all spineless, but it's better than some dedicated anti-trans extremists being put into that role. So I don't know. On the education front, I don't feel like things are on fire this moment. So I haven't looked at it in the last couple of weeks, but
I mean, it's quite wild to think that we've still got like 2-3 more years of Conservative Party being there, right? Like they can last as long as that if they want to, or if they're lucky.
Yeah, till they couldn't be here until January 2025, I think.
Yeah,
which is horrific.
Yeah,
like, would there even be a country left?
I mean, I find it hard to believe they'll last that long, but yeah, who knows? I think something very simple, like even if like Ukraine somehow wins the war, then I feel like every party that was involved in that is going to like skyrocket in the polls or something. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of, I think at the moment it's just all in the air.
Possibly. I mean, yeah, all of the Conservatives just try and keep posting pictures of them shaking hands with Zelensky just to make it sure that everyone knows.
Yeah. You argue with a lot of TERFs. I always notice like, so when I talk to like American transphobes, it's very expected of them, like right wing, usually anti-immigration, all the other things, MAGA hats, usually have problems with gay people and all that as well. When I speak to UK TERFs, it's always, I feel like they have this really different method where they prey so hard on like otherwise progressive people, like someone who might
Yeah.
even be like a Green Party, like especially like it's always like been the mums of exes for some reason. It's like they'll be very very progressive, but for whatever reason, like the turf brainworm like creeps in, and it happened to my mum has worked in the NHS, and like it happened to her as well for like a wee while, but then it's not there anymore. But like how do you feel like you have to approach these two people like differently, or do you just is it all the same to you, or yeah, especially with arguing
Oh,
and that kind of thing?
yeah, I definitely I try and approach everyone individually, and I think that you're right that there's kind of two large classes. There's the kind of like Republican, and then there's a kind of the um in a way, turf is the right word to use. Even though that maybe things have moved on a little bit since
Hmm.
then, but there's this kind of like, actually, I'm a progressive and I just have some concerns, and then there's the like, uh, groomers against the wall, Republicans types.
Yeah.
Um, and I would approach them differently, but I think there is a couple of other subgroups. I actually one of my cartoons is taxonomy of slurs for trans women, and I think that kind of divides it up. The like type of transfers. I might be able to find the cartoon actually. We could go through it if you wanted.
The car. Yeah. Okay.
But I definitely approach all these people differently, because I think one of the first things you need to do when you're arguing with these people is decide what your like, why are you doing it? Because you could just argue with some knobhead quietly in a dark room for literally forever and then walk out and have achieved absolutely nothing.
Hmm.
Um, so when you're arguing with people, if you're there to change someone's mind, you need to meet them some way towards their views. You need to basically just accept all their premises and then ask a few questions and be nice to them and handhold them and all this kind of tedious, rubbish.
Yeah.
But if you're there to counter misinformation, then you still need to think of what audience you're listening to. If you walk right into Republican space and you say, this is false, like, they don't care.
Yeah.
They love false stuff. That's what they live on. But
I mean, just
um,
yeah, I thought with that, with Republicans is like when it comes to science, I remember having like this argument with people who are like assuming that for the Republican legislators are like the anti-science when it comes to blockers and things like that because of some like very like malicious intent. But I'm like, Republicans kill themselves with bad science. Like, look at what they did with the
yeah,
pandemic and shit like that. Like that's how detached they are from that kind of. But yeah, sorry. Yeah, go on.
no, totally. And so you do need to think about those kinds of like angles. When you're like arguing with these people, what the audience is and what you're trying to achieve and all this kind of stuff. But also, if you do get in a situation where you're like, I am going to counter what this person has said, you also need to be aware of what their beliefs are and what is going to, like. I think a classic example is when I first started on Twitter. One of the things that all the kind of like cis ally libs were saying was like, actually, sex and gender are different, and like
Mm-hmm.
to Republicans, that might be a point. Like they'll be like, oh, you're not a real woman. They'll be like, actually, gender is different to sex, and you can be whatever gender you want. And then they're like, rah, and then you have this big argument about whether anyone can be any gender they want or not. And that's like the point of disagreement with Republicans. But for gender criticals, that won't work at all. And they'll be like, yeah, I know sex and gender are different. That's what I'm saying. And I think sex is important and gender is pointless. And if you were to walk in there and say this like 2016 argument with a gender critical, they would absolutely trounce you. So you need to be aware of what their like beliefs are in order to just not have them walk around you. Anyone who's still doing the sex and gender are different argument is wasting their time.
Based. Yeah, I'm glad someone said yeah. Fuck. Because not only that, but gender critical people, even in America as well, like they'll call themselves gender abolitionists for that reason, right?
Mm. Yeah,
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 like
exactly.
the co-opting of progressive language is like really fucked in that regard. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, it's a key part of their strategy, and I think that one of the key parts of the gender critical strategy, for whatever reason, our political landscape has landed uh, differently to the USA, where in the USA, being as extreme as you want is just acceptable, and that flies. You can say anything. You can be a front runner for like governor somewhere if you said you want to kill LGBT people.
Mm.
Whereas in the UK, that just does not work, and you have to do all this like polite, not really saying what you mean, like suggestions and just asking questions. And so that's why these things have evolved. And there's a number of reasons for that. I don't know. We can go into that later maybe, but it's meant that gender critical argument is all about just asking a few questions and just casting a few doubts, and we don't have a problem with anyone else, and we otherwise are normal, and like it's just this one thing, and that's really their focus. That's that like their main strategy for all of it, really.
Yeah, and I think the other thing as well is that although they might have this like otherwise progressive and everything else, I feel like with having watched people I've known in real life go down that path is like the conservative stuff starts to kind of infect like the rest of their life as well.
Yeah,
Unfortunately,
I
yeah.
mean it does, because I think that like, and I think is a good I think I found the diagram. Good. It's really hard searching
Oh, if you
my
could send it
cartoons
on
tweets.
Twitter DMs because Discord is like it's got your camera up right now.
Yeah, okay. But yeah, just to wait, what was the last question? Sorry, my multitask failed.
Forgot.
Oh yeah, people get
Yeah, yeah.
infected. Yeah. So I think that
Can I put
like a
this up
good
on my Twitch
example of
screen?
this.
Holy shit. I actually
Yeah, maybe
can't.
you can't.
It's like
Maybe you
Slur
can't.
Central. I'll just paste it in the chat. Holy shit.
Hey, okay. Perhaps we shouldn't be saying them. It's just all the slurs for trans women that I could think of. We had a little team exercise in groups chats. Like, what other slurs can you think of? What else have
Yeah.
you been called?
God. CIA
Um,
operatives in here, eh? God. All right. Almost got me, Katie. Almost got me. All right.
yeah, just going around getting all the progressives banned by.
Yes.
Yeah,
Based. All right. Sorry.
yeah, but the brain rot thing. I think that if you lots of this reactionary stuff it's a general thought pattern, and if you get taught the ideas for it for trans people, it's so easy to just move over to thinking about someone else. And like a good example is one of the discussions being had at the moment is the statistics for like hate crimes or murders or whatever against trans people. And if you're a feminist, you'll be like, oh well, the majority of women don't report sexual assault, and we know
Hmm.
that because there's so many like studies on it that ask women when they're not reporting to the police, and we talk to shelters which have decades of expertise and stuff, and we know that women don't report to the police because they're worried that the police could make it worse, or they won't be taken seriously, or even if they are, they'll still have to relive the event loads and loads and loads, and often they're in a position where it's not safe for them. Whole range of things. And when you understand that, you're like, oh, that maybe this applies to gay people too. And then you talk to the gay rights organizations, and they're like, yeah, gay people don't report to the police, and often crimes against them aren't reported as being against gay people. And then when you learn that, you're like, oh, it's the same for trans people, and it is, and it's all the same pattern, because it's a standard pattern of how people who face oppression react to the power structures we have. But if you're gender critical, that can't fly. You need to believe that trans people are the safest, best. They're privileged ones. They're the ones pulling the strings behind big pharma.
Hmm.
So you say, oh well, look, there were no murders recorded against trans people in the last 5 years. So therefore, they're the safest demographic in the UK. And once you got taught that little thought pattern, then you've made this argument 100 times to trans people, and then this gender critical person who's also a homophobe and was dedicated homophobe would be like, you know what? Stonewall's making it up about gay people too.
Mm-hmm.
Look, they're saying the same thing. There's been no murders against gay people in the last few months, and you'd be like, oh, it is the same. And like you've thought this little argument in your mind like 100 times for trans people, and you just insert gay people, and it makes sense too. And then once you fall down that path, you can easily just point out the same thing about women, and then suddenly you're an anti-feminist. So yeah.
Yeah, I always find murder rates like a really difficult one, because I know like in Latin America, like the murder rate for trans people is kind of huge. But I always think when it comes to the UK, like that talking point is so irritating, because trans people are such a small demographic
Yeah.
that it would only take like 2 or 3 trans people to get murdered in a year for the murder rate to be like to increase by like 2 or 300%, right? Like that because it's such a small demographic, and there's yeah. So they could go from like the least quote unquote murdered group in the UK to the most, like just with 1 or 2 deaths. So yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
I always feel like
It's
hate crimes and assaults are more like useful for that. Yeah.
absolutely, and it's it's so rare. But also, I mean, if you look at the last decade, and there's been I don't know what the exact numbers are off the top of my head, but I've had this so many times where someone's like, 3 women are killed a week in the UK, and lots of them are by domestic violence. And only whatever it is, 5 trans people have been killed in the last decade or something. But then if you just run the numbers and you're like, well, there are 300 times more cis women than there are trans people or trans women, and in like the murder rates, even just with those super low numbers over, are just the same. It's just that it sounds a lot less because there's a lot less of us. But like you say, it's so easily changed by noise. It's such a low, low number statistic. I don't know what I'm trying to say. Low data size. I've forgotten the words. But also another key factor in this, yeah, is a bad science. That's a problem. Another key like data fact in this is that lots of trans people aren't recorded as trans people when they have crimes committed against them. I mean, if you have unsupportive family who maybe even embarrassed that you're a trans person, why would they, and especially if you meet a transphobic police officer, or I'm just a man, innit? Like, and you haven't got a gender recognition certificate, or even if you have got a gender recognition certificate, like if I was murdered and my family weren't supportive and around to, in my life, then maybe I'll just get recorded as a cis woman. I mean, how would you know? So
yeah, is it still the case in the? I know the European Union banned this in 2017, but we're not in the EU. Is it still the case in the UK that you need to get full fuck? Is the term still SRS or has it changed?
I'm gonna cancel you. Go pick one, cis man.
Bottom surgery. We'll say that. Fuck. All right. It's still the case that you need the full surgery to get gender recognition, like legally, or is that not the case in the UK?
No, you do not, and you've never at any point needed genital reassignment surgery, is what I call it. I say GRS, though. I think that lots of people, basically, I don't, like we were saying straight talking earlier. I don't like having euphemisms for things. Like call it vaginoplasty or genital reconfiguration surgery or something like that, because that says exactly what it is. Because when we say bottom surgery, it's like, well, it's quite a lot of options, really, because technically orchiectomy, where they just remove testicles, is a bottom surgery. And also, then like sexual reassignment surgery, I think, is not really true, because it's changing your genitals isn't changing your sex, because there's loads of components to sex. It's one of many. My least favorite, which is kind of the mainstream one, is gender confirmation surgery. And I fucking hate that, because that suggests that genitals confirm your gender, and it's like, what? That because then you're just saying that someone who hasn't had their gender confirmed. I just think it's a really terrible term, and it's just people trying to be nice and stepping back from using horrible surgery words, and it just ends up being, I think, offensive. Not that it really matters, but
I feel like you're fighting
you're
fighting a really uphill battle there, getting people to remember all the automies. Okay, yeah.
I know. So I've got double strength here, because one, I'm a trans person. I've researched these surgeries like to fuck, and secondly, I'm a death metal fan, so I already knew all these words anyway, like epicardiectomy and. But that's a good band, by the way. But yeah, my pro tip to you is never say full surgery again.
Okay.
Because it makes it sound like someone who's not had it isn't a full, not a full woman yet. You ain't got yeah. So it's like, but I'm not offended. It's fine.
Good. Yeah. Okay. yeah. Fuck. I guess. Do you want to do like some of the there are slightly more spicy questions here, I guess.
Oh, you can get as spicy as you want, mate.
Okay.
Well, you can go as spicy as Twitch can handle.
Yeah. Okay. No, I won't say slurs. Don't worry. You tried to get me there. Okay, it's not happening. So, I didn't notice this until very recently. That there's this kind of like maybe it's growing. I don't even know if it's growing. Maybe it's just been there all the time. Of like, like especially like young trans girls, probably more right wing ones, who identify as autogynephiles. Like they feel like that represents their. And I always thought, like when I looked back at autogynephilia, I felt like the big criticism that I had of it was that it seemed to be describing a thing that's actually quite normal for most people. Is like that kind of like I guess like seeing your like that kind of
Owner box
euphoria
AGP
of
confirmed.
yeah, like seeing yourself. Well, obviously, it's got like massive toxic implications, and I would never, it's a dog shit word, but like, um, you know what I mean? Like, I think it was ContraPoints who said that, like, cis men are fucking obsessed with their own dicks, right? That doesn't make them like auto androphiles. Like, it's not a mental illness, you know? Same with like cis women love like looking at themselves during sex and shit like that. So why would you want to be any different for trans people? Have you ever encountered that, or do you know how to handle that kind of like thing? Or
Yeah, so I quite enjoy finding people who disagree with me and listening to what they have to say. I probably delved into gender critical when I first started, and it sometimes it can be really horrible because they'll say something and you're like, "Fuck, I don't have a counter to this at all." And like, if I'm going to be rational, I've just got to accept this, and that really messes up everything I think. And you have to have this like big think about what your worldview is. And talking to gender critical people has changed my mind on some issues. I'm not saying that they really have any big issues, right? But like sometimes, they'll make a comment. I'll be like, oh, well, that has kind of unearthed how one of my premises isn't very secure or whatever. And I like talking to religious people and stuff. And people, Blanchardians or whatever you want to call them, people who believe in AGP/HSTS, so that's autogynephilia or homosexual transsexual, that dichotomy, there are like that is kind of integrated into gender critical. It's kind of in TERFism. It's kind of in a Republican anti-trans space. But there is this like hardcore group of them who absolutely live by this thing. It's like a religion to them. This little group, usually trans women, but there's always some trans men there too. And sometimes you get some cis men and cis women who are like stragglers onto these little cult groups. And it is amazing. They're just a different way of existing. And like I've gone and delved into these groups, and the first thing they want to do is be absolutely sure they can categorize you as one or the other, like AGP or HSTS. And it because it's so maybe for anyone who doesn't know what the hell I'm talking about. So like you say, autogynephilia is often described as a man who has a fetish for himself as a woman in sex. Or sometimes they'll say it's not in sex, but just like in life. And then, so what they then do is accuse all lesbian trans women of being that. They're like, oh, the reason that you want to be a woman or you think you want to be a woman is actually just because you have some weird fetish for being a woman in sex. And that's it. But that doesn't really make sense for straight trans women. So they came up with this other thing, homosexual transsexual, which is another sex thing, which is where they basically say, oh, you're a gay man, but you're just so gay that you want to only have sex with straight men. And the only way to do that is to be a woman. So that's why you've transitioned. And that's like the premise of this ideology. And when you're just presented that and you're already transphobic cis person, you might be like, yeah, makes sense to me. They're all fucking sex obsessed weirdos, so why not? But as soon as you start asking questions, you're like, well, what about bisexual trans women or asexual or trans men? Where do they fit into this? Or non-binary people or trans women who clearly don't have a fetish for anything? Or, it just doesn't match the data. I think that the real issue with this theory isn't so much that some cis people are obsessed with their own bodies and some trans people aren't. It's more that it's just fucking garbage. Like it doesn't really match up with anything. Like if I think about the trans people I know and my own experience, it just doesn't make any sense. Like who the hell would turn their entire life upside down and like, go through the hardest thing that I've ever done just because what you want to have sex? I mean, maybe some people are that sex obsessed and that short-sighted, but it just seems ridiculous to me. But these little crews, when you meet them, these HSTS, AGP crews of trans people, they like love this stuff, and they always want to class you, and because it's so bullshit, this area, and it's so transphobic, there's a hierarchy, and if you're HSTS, you're just better than if you're an AGP. And so when you meet one of these groups, they want to decide which hierarchy you're in, and it just comes down to how much they like you. There's a few things you must have. You have to be pretty. You have to be, generally have to be passing, but that's not always a rule. If you've got a really dominant HSTS in the group, then suddenly passing isn't a rule. You usually have to have genital surgery or want it, but not always. If it just depends on who's the most dominant person in this little group and how much they like you and how much you are like them. And then they'll just call you one or the other depending on that, and it can change from day to day, and it's just hilarious. But it means that you get these kind of so you get two reasons, I think, that you get these trans women who will call themselves AGP. Like, one of them is that you said they're like politically right wing, and they kind of do this like I'm one of the good ones thing, and it's their way of seeing themselves in the hierarchy. And if they, I might be AGP, but I'm not one of these crazy ones. I control it, and it's like one of these people like, I have homosexual urges, but I'm not one of these bad deviants. And it's kind of like that. And the other is this kind of like sorry for themselves. Is there maybe there's three then, and this second one is it's their only way of fitting in. They always just see themselves as lower, and they find one of these HSTS dominant people to like suck onto and to be their like minion. And then sometimes you get these AGP cis men, gender critical men, who will be like, oh well, I'm an autogonophile and I don't see the need to transition. And what they mean is they just like cross-dress or wank trans porn or whatever, and that they're the kind of like three.
I know exactly who you're talking about. Is this King Critical you're talking about?
It wasn't, but he plainly is.
Yeah. That guy's a fucking asshole. He's agreed to talk to me so many times after making videos about me, but he never actually comes around to it.
So I found out recently he did a video debunking my cartoons.
He does, yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, he's a funny one. Someone else.
There are a lot of those guys, by the way. They're like in the mentions and in the show more section. There's quite a few of them.
Well, believe it or not, there's one who I kind of knew in real life. Just like very indirectly through like a local music scene. I'm gonna type his. He's very small, but I know he fights with you a lot, which is really funny.
Okay, I need to know.
I'm gonna DM you on Twitter to see if you know who this is.
Oh, I can't wait. I've got a suspect. Oh, okay, that isn't who I was thinking. I do recognize that name, but I don't know them enough to know off the top of my head.
He's an absolute dipshit anyway. Like the fact that he fell into the turf hole is like not surprising at all. Anyway, someone else asked me this. I don't even know how I feel about the premise of it, but okay. Why they're asking, why are trans men less visible online? If they are, I don't know.
Yeah,
or definitely less visible in the discourse, I imagine. I always feel like bathroom arguments, especially, are so easily won as soon as trans men exist. Like people make the bathroom arguments, just forgot about trans men. It's like, well, you want people to go to their assigned sex at birth bathroom, then like just show them like two pictures of some huge trans bearded man and like a woman surrounded by women in a bathroom. It's like, okay, I get it, you know.
I love watching people try and defend that, and there's the kind of like intellectually honest, which is a very rare term to apply to gender criticals and anti-trans people, but like Mayor Forstate has recently got on board with this position, which is, oh well, I don't want them in the women's toilet either. Like that's the only sensible response you can give to this, and then that just looks like transphobia, because you're saying I don't want any trans people in my toilets. I mean, that's literally what she's saying, and it's because she's, that's her position. But then you get these other people who want ideological consistency and purity, and they don't want to fall into this "well, you're transphobic" then trap. Because if you say that to Mayor Forstater, what's she going to do? Just ignore you and shrug and just carry on. But Mayor Forstater is one of J.K. Rowling's mates, by the way.
Yeah.
But then you get these kind of like gender critical grunts and the rank and file types who want to keep their little purity, and they'll be like, no, I'm fine with any female, and that's what I think a trans man is, and I'm fine with any of them. And you're like, so just this random guy who you could never tell. Oh well, it can't make sense in their mind that you can never tell, so therefore they have to always be able to tell. And I'm sure, if I saw them in real life, I'd instantly know that it was a woman.
Yeah.
And it's just so funny watching them absolutely flail trying to make this work. But yeah, you are right. It's a stupid position. And the thing is, the reason why it works is when you say trans person to most, or 10 years ago when you said trans person, you would have thought of the Hollywood stereotype of some 45-year-old man wearing a dress in secret. Like that's what people think of. So when you say trans people should go in the toilets to their birth sex, all they think of is that stereotype. And let's say, what about trans men? That doesn't mean anything to them. They're just like, yeah, just keep them out. What's the problem? So that's why it doesn't really work as a dunk. And you have to show examples and say what these terms mean, and then they'll be like, oh well, and then they haven't really thought of it because they've never approached this in their life. They're just angry.
Yeah.
But why trans men are less visible? Yeah, I think that is one of them. Is that the stereotype of a trans person? I think the idea of a man giving up male privilege is quite scary for society, because it shows that the hierarchy between men and women is flexible, which men don't like. Like, what if if you just start doing these things, then suddenly you no longer have male privilege. You could just turn into a woman and be a second-class citizen. They don't like the idea of that. There's also the kind of like homophobia of like, oh, if you think trans women are men and you're attracted to them, then are you gay? Oh, that's terrifying. There's nothing worse than being gay. So that kind of thing means that because it's men controlling the conversation, straight men controlling the conversation, that trans women are at the top of the talking list. Like, their issue are, what about trans women in UFC? Because I think I could beat every single woman in the world in a fight. And what happens when a trans woman is in my bedroom and I'm doing a sex? Like, that's suddenly a problem because I'm homophobic and transphobic at the same time.
Yeah.
And then what happens when my wife's getting undressed? Like, if I was in the women's changing room, I'd be perving on everyone. So what about when a trans woman does it? Like, I'm sure they're just as predatory as I am. So that's going to be clipped out of context.
Good.
But but like that means that's what straight cis men talk about is what the discourse is, and it means that in response to it, the kind of liberal thing to do is be like, oh no, look, here's my trans friend, she's beautiful, you would never know, you're attacking her. And the thing is, that does become an argument, and it is a form of argument against their position, and so that ends up being the thing. You end up with pretty passing trans women as the thing that everyone raises up to combat the transphobic narrative. And that's why they end up at the top. Because you say, oh, like, where are all the trans men in the discourse? But where are all the trans women who aren't white, straight, passing, pretty, under 30?
Yeah.
That it's not just trans women they're picking for. It's this little protect the woman, block that they just want to fit into the kind of like patriarchy. We need to defend these people too, kind of view of the world, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, when I say that, it's just because you've said it all. I don't need to add anything. It's not like I'm. Okay. Okay. I often hear discussions about what makes a good ally. Do you feel supported by cis people in general? Do you have an idea of what makes a good or bad ally? Do you see people who maybe present themselves as pro-trans, but actually they're shite, or what?
I know some trans people who present themselves as trans people and are shite.
Oh.
I didn't. Yeah, not saying who. I wrote an article about that on my website, by the way. It's more important to show solidarity than it is to like people. That's my position. But I think I'm quite understanding of cis people who like don't they're trying their best. I've done another cartoon of this, but it's got another slur in it, so I won't link you. But basically, it's like a best to worst. The best.
We're seeing a pattern emerge in your behavior here, but
I don't know if it's necessarily got a slur in it. Let me see if I can find it. But like, oh, Twitter's been really laggy. Gosh, it wasn't always like this.
Well, yeah, back in the day.
I just try and remember the caption I wrote with it. Oh, good, got it straight away. Search for the word prefer, and you can decide the slur. It's got the T word and it's got the L word.
What the fuck is the L word?
What people call trans women in Thailand.
Oh yeah, okay.
Oh, it does also say
okay. Yeah, I can't put that on screen, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
So there's like a best to worst, and the best trans ally is someone who's like knows everything that they're saying, and they've got trans friends, and they've talked about it, and they're a feminist, and they're engaged, and they don't just want to reform the system, they want to completely build it from the bottom. Like they're the best cis allies. But someone who just like they don't know anything. Like I know some people like this at the pub. They don't know anything about trans rights. They wouldn't even know what to say. They'd be the kind of person who say, "Oh, have you had the surgery?" Like there's these stereotypes in the 90s, but they know me, and they don't want me to be hurt, and they're aware that I am a trans person, and if it comes up, they'd be like, "That's horrible. Like, who do I need to beat up to protect you, or whatever?" Like that kind of just general clumsy cis allyship. I still like those people, and I know if they were on TV giving a speech on behalf of my rights, they'd probably wind me up because they'd probably say a load of clumsy stuff, easy to dismantle rubbish, and it might be negative. But as support, that they still support me. They still support trans rights. They still support trans people, and they are better than someone who uses the right words but asks a few questions or just have a few valid concerns about the trans rights community, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And they can often be presented if they say, "Oh, I support LGBT rights, but they're kind of the worst people." Anyway, on my cartoon, I've got this, the supporters, the people, the kind of supporting slur says, the people who are like openly fascist, and then the worst of all are the ones who pretend to be pro-LGBT but aren't, because they waste your time even more.
So is it more of like, I guess you would say like it's an issue to be more like politically dangerous than rhetorically, like, right? Like it's like someone who does like the rhetoric badly is not as bad as someone who maybe is saying the right things, but they're at the end of the day going to vote against like kids' rights and shit like that.
Yeah, exactly. And like, if I can I even say slurs on Twitch? You said I shouldn't say anything.
Well, you are trans, so you should be allowed to, but I have no fucking
I'm not risking it. I'm not going to risk it. Let's just be like, if your mates going to vote and they're just like, "Oh, my mate Katy, she's a T word, innit? I'll vote for the person that's not going to be horrible to her." Like, I would say to that person, "Can you please not call me that?" Just so you know, my strategy is to over explain, so they're like, "Fuck, I'm never going to say that again because otherwise she might give me a history lesson." Like, bloody hell.
Yeah.
But like they're so much better than someone who's like, yeah, like you say, politically dangerous, not rhetorically dangerous. And I think that lots of people just confuse this stuff. Like, I get that, like the classic of J.K. Rowling, like, "Oh, when she ever said a bad thing? When she ever said a bad thing?" You're like, well, here she is supporting someone advocating to remove all human rights for trans people. Here she is selling the idea that trans people are a danger to women. Here she, all these things are like, well, when she ever said the T word? It's like, it doesn't matter if she has or not. Like, that's not the issue. The issue is that she's trying to ruin our lives, not that she uses the wrong words. And I think a lot of sort of lib types see prejudice as just purely whether you say slurs or not. I mean, like Twitch does.
Yeah. I think it's like It's funny you say lib. I always feel like I associate it with just like whether it's like liberal or left wing, it's people who are very like aesthetics brained. Like it's
Yeah.
just the cues, and that's what matters. Yeah, I always find that a bit weird. That's a really interesting answer though about the the guy in the voting booth saying slurs. Um, I think it speaks quite a lot to my real life experience as well. Unfortunately,
Well,
um,
I've had it before. I had it once at a party where someone was like the most cringe. They just said so another the words that used to be used for trans women in porn,
hmm
uh, the S one.
yeah,
Someone was just like, "Oh, Katy, you're a S word, right?" And I was like, "Fucking hell!" In front of a group of people I don't know,
Jesus
like,
Christ.
please never say that word again. Absolutely cringe as fuck. But they were trying to be supportive. They were being like, "Oh no, she's great. You should follow her on Twitter." Like, yeah, it's really cool. And I was just like, "Well, this person they mean well, and that's more important than the opposite." So,
hmm
uh.
Um, fuck. What was I gonna? That made me think of something. Um, yeah, I've always been a bit because I never discovered this until recently, just like listening to like more right leaning trans people, just because I like not like Blair White types, but like ones who just have like a very different perspective on trans rights. And it's kind of like
Yeah.
weird to me. But the one I heard, and I feel like I've experienced this so much in real life, is like usually if the discussion about trans people ever comes up with real life friends or just people in real life, is like I usually try to push them on this idea of like I feel like most people who say trans women are women uh, maybe don't have the best explanation for why they think that.
Mm,
And sometimes when I push people, I'm quite surprised by how a lot of them just like they do feel like they're just saying it just because that's the right thing to say. Like even though they
mm,
support everything else when it comes to rights and everything, and they have like no issues with bathrooms or kids or anything like that, like the what like nothing. But they're just sitting there going like, wait, but are they really women though? You know, and I'm like, I've never really figured out exactly like how to deal with that. Do you think the idea of like putting trans women or women as like the frontal phrase? I think for me, it always leads me into these very like annoying like metaphysical conversations, like language and all that. And yeah, I think again like contrapoints, like saying that maybe like better slogans might be like trans liberation now, where it's like rights are more important than like the philosophy thing. Like, do you have any opinions on that? Or
yeah, strong opinions on this.
yeah.
I like everything. So brace for a long answer. I think that I don't really care if you believe that I have like a man's soul or whatever, or if you think that there's some kind of wizard that designs people's sex and I'm the wrong one, or whatever. Like it doesn't affect me. Who cares what you think? If you are still gonna respect me and talk to me like a human, and you're not gonna take away my human rights, and then would say, well, like there is this kind of like metaphysical argument. Oh, what is a woman? Like, oh, where does it start and end? Where are the boundaries? And we can have this like big argument, and in the end, it's going to come down to a lot of subjective decisions. Um, and I'll argue that with anyone forever because I do actually like that kind of argument, and I do think that I am a woman, and it makes sense to say trans women are women, at least as a general catch-all for what we're trying to say. But you're right, I don't think it's a good argument. And also, I don't think it matters. I think that the reason I want, we should think of like what practical rights I want. Uh, I want to carry on having protections in the UK from misogynistic sexism. If someone, if I applied for a job and someone turned me away because I was a woman, I would want legal protections to defend me for that. And that isn't because I think I'm a woman or my metaphysical state is a woman or I have a woman's soul or whatever garbage. It's because it's just an observable fact that I sometimes face misogyny,
Mhm.
and so do loads of trans women. And that's why we should have that right. So, regardless of whether you say trans women are women or not, we still need protection from misogynistic sexism. And it's the same with all of these like little rights arguments. The point in all of our sort of power structures and law and stuff is should be to protect people from like forces of oppression and prejudice and stuff. And we get targeted along with cis women for all of it. So, I mean, it just makes sense. Um, so that's kind of when given these arguments, that's always what I try and focus on when I'm trying to sell these ideas. And I hate it when like you get some politician who goes on the radio and they want to argue for trans rights, and they're like, oh, I believe trans women are women and that's why they should have dignity and respect, and they need their identities validating. And I just, oh, like, fuck off. Like, yes, yeah, okay, everyone does benefit from having their identity validated, and cis people get it for free every single day, and trans people have to work for it. So for sure, validation is important, and I'm very privileged in that I have my identity validated all the time, every single day, and loads of trans people don't, and it's very easy for me to lose sight of how important that is. But at the same time, that just is not the biggest deal. What trans people want is an ability to live their life. They want to be able to, exist in this capitalist hellhole. They want to have a job. They want to live somewhere. They want to not be attacked for who they are. They want to be able to eat. And all of those things are why we have human rights laws protecting them from various things. And so when a politician goes up, what they should be saying is, we need the Gender Recognition Act, not because it's nice to have your identity validated on your birth certificate. It is, like, that is a thing. But because this stuff affects things like death certificates and marriage certificates, and can have all kinds of knock-on effects based on those important things. And when it comes to recognizing trans people in the Equality Act, trans women as women, the importance there is we need the protections from misogyny. The reason I want an F on my passport, it is nice. Like, it is validating or whatever, but is so I can safely travel to other countries. Like, that's the reason I want it. So I think we need to look at these practical arguments as like the main drive for this whenever we're arguing for anything to do with trans rights. And like you say, people do accept this. They're like, oh, trans women are women. I know my friend Katy, she's a woman in my mind. And someone's like, all right, then, what is a woman? And you can see where that worked on so many liberal people, because most people don't have some big, grand, unified, consistent worldview. Like, the more I argue with people, the more I realize that people are just absolutely, they have nothing. They're just a walking bag of inconsistencies, and every single thing they think is a direct contradiction of something else they think. And that means that selling them this idea of trans women are women, I mean, it's true. I'll argue it's true, but it'd be much better to sell them like, we need protection from misogyny because we face misogyny. Like, that's a better argument. So yeah,
I kind of agree with that. I think what the thing about what is a woman is, I think the effective thing about it is that you only have to ask that question, and then you just sit back and let the other person wind themselves up into a knot.
And whoever asked it first can do that.
Yeah.
Because it's not like the right-wing reactionary TERF. They don't have an answer. Theirs is hilarious.
Yeah.
But the thing is, if they ask it first, then to a bystander, you're the one who looks like you're performing badly.
Yeah. Have you ever since watching that documentary, I'm just thinking, like, fuck, what's the best answer to give? And I've got a few ideas, but like, suppose you were going down the street and some guy with a microphone and a camera comes up to you and asks you what a woman is. What would you say?
So my current strategy, which seems to be fine, is I'll just be like, oh, I'm fine with the dictionary definition.
Adult human female, or whatever the fuck, like.
Well, they'll say adult human female, and then you can be like, oh, it's actually adult female human. Fine. Which dictionary do you want to look at? Yeah. And then they'll be like, oh, and then they pick one, and then most of them say trans women are women. Like, most of the main dictionaries, Merriam-Webster and Oxford Languages and stuff. So that's if they'll be like, oh, she's taken the bait, an adult human female. Oh! And then you're like, well, your own resource says the opposite of what you think, so whatever. But then that's the like surface level first layer of deflection, because like I am happy with the dictionary. I don't care. Dictionaries are descriptive, not prescriptive. We can have that argument if we want. But also, if they do then go on, they'll be like, no, because you're not female, and you'd be like, why? What's your definition of female? Are you not happy with the dictionary? And they'll be like, yeah, the dictionary says, typically, and you're like, well, typically, not all women then, isn't it? So not all women are, and it's like self-referential, and like, give me a better definition. And then suddenly they're the ones scrabbling to come up with one, and they're the ones who are claiming that there is a strict definition, and I'm not claiming that. So as soon as they start cracking into prescriptive definitions, then then they're in real trouble because there's always a counterexample to absolutely everything they come up with. So that's kind of my usual strategy. I don't like this kind of what is a woman? Oh, it's anyone who identifies as a woman. I mean, we can argue whether that's like true or not, but it's like the crummiest one-line answer
Yeah.
to that one easy one question. Because to a bystander, they'll just be like, "Is it?"
Yeah, that's like
And then,
circular. Does it mean you can choose to be a
yeah,
woman? Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Um, fuck. Do you?
Oh wait, you said you had a few answers. What would you go for?
So I think I have said like I think I even said in my video I would say like which you helped me with by the way. So just in case chat didn't know. I think I would probably say adult human female and then be like, wait, do you think that means trans women aren't women? And then I mean as soon as I can start to ask them what an adult
Yeah,
human female is,
exactly.
that's quite useful. I think also another person who does these kind of discussions told me that like you can maybe get into a discussion about how like definitions don't really tell you that much about a word. Like not really. They give you like a very rough guideline, but it's not like we get the meaning of word from the definition. Like
Yeah.
I, if you did, then like a horse would be a chair
Well,
because it fits the definition,
well,
right? Like
I did some podcasts with Krista Peterson, if you know her. She's
Mhm.
a philosophy. I don't know what a philosophy thing. Maybe Doctor of Philosophy. I don't know which
Mhm.
one she is. Sorry, Krista. But she did like some philosophy of language or something. I don't know. But I said something along these lines, like, "Oh well, the word doesn't define the concept. Whether we had a word for it or not, it would just exist as a concept anyway." And she was like, "Whoa, slow down." And like, apparently, that's really controversial in philosophy of language because some concepts only exist because we have words for them.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is interesting. But I think to say that words contain all of the information in the the definition contains all of the information of the concept is probably less controversial to say that's false.
Yeah, because I'm really sold on the idea that like use is meaning, right? That the
mm,
way we use a word and practice that's where it gets its meaning from, and we don't typically learn about what a concept is just through the definition. I don't think we ever do
yeah,
really. We learn it through examples or family resemblance or use. So that's why
yeah,
I maybe go around that and be like, well, yeah, like fucking Billie Eilish is a woman, Kate Montgomery's a woman, like your mom's a woman. Yeah, I don't know. Like just doing by example instead. And
yeah,
maybe just try to shoehorn them into what is a chair, whatever the fuck.
yeah.
But
That's just such a good dunk. I
I
just love it.
I agree with the thing you said about actually like like the words like provide the concept because I think it was when Judith Butler said this thing about like because I think if you ask most people what came first, sex or gender, they'd probably say sex. But like Judith Butler argues the opposite is like long before we started looking at chromosomes and
Mm,
like the science behind sex, like we did it all with gender already in mind. So that gender like preceded sex. I thought that was quite interesting, just because the way that our understanding of sex is informed by gender, not the other way around. Um, yeah,
yeah,
I
for
don't know.
sure. I think another possible answer is I just give a purposely nonsense one and ask them to say it's wrong. They're like, give me a definition of woman. I'm like, anyone who is 6 foot tall or taller. That is my definition of woman.
Why?
Like,
Why?
because that's me. It includes me.
Okay.
Doesn't what's the problem? Do you have an issue with that definition? But of course you got an issue with that definition because you find a counterexample. It's like, oh, okay, so we're trying to find a
Ah.
definition that doesn't have a counterexample. Can you give me one? No, you can't, can you? And you almost as soon like if I say a woman is anyone who is 6 foot or taller, the first thing that anyone's going to do is come up with a counterexample. That's their brain's going to do that, or they're just going to say no, it's adult human female, and you're like, cool, what does that mean?
Hmm.
And I get that maybe a gender critical person watching this discussion right now might be like, oh, you're just coming up with strategies to avoid answering the question, and that is kind of true because on a surface level, because that is the whole point in asking what is a woman, because gender critical people who are watching this, hello, you don't have an answer to the question. You think you do. You think, oh, adult, human, female, and they're like, cool, what do those words mean? You're like, oh, we don't need to talk about adult and human, even though they absolutely do not have strict definitions. Then you're like, well, just female, and oh, it's just, you know, someone who has eggs. And then you're like, well, not everyone. They're like, oh, well, someone's meant to. Like, it doesn't matter. It's just binary. I just have a blind faith. You don't have an answer to this. And when we don't have an answer, we don't have a strict one sentence definition that includes all women and excludes all men, because there isn't one. Not because we cannot provide one because our ideology is inconsistent like you. It's because the concept we're attempting to describe does not have strict edges. Like that's the issue here. And you can prove me wrong very easily just by giving me a definition that does have strict edges.
Yeah.
But no one has. So, open challenge. I will buy you a drink.
I mean, I'm thinking of doing a series where I look at all the like comments in my video that's like someone who thinks they've found the perfect definition of chair. It's like there's always some like knight in shining armor who's come to solve like 2,000 years of philosophy. Yeah.
Yeah, you just add in an extra thing, like it's typically with a back and four legs and made of wood and also has a horizontal surface. Like proved it. Like horses' backs aren't horizontal. So and you're like, well, oh, we just need another caveat. We just need an extra thing. It doesn't have ears. Like, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, suddenly you got a definition with the word typically in it about 20 times. Yeah.
Strictly typically.
You've been I know you've been I think you've told me before that you've been offered to go on like TV shows to debate the likes of I don't know if it's like Piers Morgan or someone along those lines, or like GB News and all that. But I feel like you've told me before that you're sometimes apprehensive about doing that, even though I think you've done it sometimes. You've spoken to Kathleen Stock, was it?
Right. So just clearing up the details. I haven't done many where I've done this for reasons I'll go into in a second. I called into a call-in show with Kathleen Stock and argued with her a bit, which got a video of that on my YouTube if you want to watch. I went in with a very specific goal, and I think I achieved it. And I also did an actual. I don't like saying debate because I don't like formal debates. I kind of think they're rubbish. But I had a discussion with Debbie Hayton, who is a trans woman who is also anti-trans, who is also self-ID as AGP, which is interesting.
Oh.
But I haven't done many others on like video. Other than my call-in show where, you know, gender critical people call in every other week pretty much and argue with me. So it's not like I'm hiding from this. But I have been offered to go on GB News. I actually did a thing for the BBC as well, which they ended up not using, where I argued with Millie Hill, who is a gender critical author. The reason I've avoided most of them. Also when there was a scheduled debate, actual like structured live debate between Helen Joyce and Grace Lavery, and Grace pulled out of that, and I think it was with Unheard, and they floated my name and asked me. The reason I don't do a lot of these is partially because you've got to consider why they're having you on. When there's some far right news channel and they want a trans person on, is that because they want to have trans people's voices heard? No, it's not. It's so they can promote their hatred and have a trans person on to legitimize it. And so you need to be really careful of this kind of thing. That, like, because I would argue with anyone if there was no optics and there was no political background. You know, if they weren't going to kill me, I'd go and argue with a neo-Nazi to their face. Like, I know I could take. They have no good arguments. I could wind them up because I have like unlimited patience for this. I find it quite satisfying, and it, you know, it's something that it's just something to do. I just like arguing, but there's so much more to it than having the best ideas. It's the presentation and stuff, and especially when it's someone like when it's GB News, you're like GB News are so nothing, you know, they're not a big deal, and for some of their live programs they have like no viewers, and almost I'd be lending my reputation to them.
Yeah,
like if I got invited to go on CNN or something, I am nothing compared to them, and that is on a personal level. For me, and also for like my brand, and also for the trans rights I can sell, that is such a big deal, like such a wide audience, and their reputation is so big that it's worth it for me.
Mm-hmm.
But when it's GB News, like I'm stooping, they're gaining. It's just there's no real benefit other than I got invited to debate Jane Claire Jones, who's like she used to be like an A rank gender critical, and now she's like I feel like she's B minus dropping into C plus. Like she lost a lot of credibility with them when she said Nazis were bad. That's not even an
What?
exaggeration. But so
Yeah.
so Jane Keller Jones. I don't really want to say I respect something about her because I think she's an idiot, but she at least has more of a integrity than lots of gender criticals. And basically, Posey Parker or Kelly J. Keane is, she's just a far right anti-feminist
Mm.
loser. And she had some speech thing at Brighton, and two different far right fascist groups showed up. One of them live streamed her event, and they showed up in support, and they weren't kicked out. Importantly, no gender critical person at this event said something the Nazis didn't like to make them leave. And so there's this big discussion in gender critical land afterwards about what they're going to do about this, because some of them were like, "This is unacceptable. We don't want Nazis showing up at our rallies." And Jane Claire Jones said that, and then most of them were like, "Shut up."
Yeah.
And then she kind of lost favor because lots of the bigger gender criticals, like Kathleen Stock, for example, were like, "Oh, I might not agree with everything Posey Parker does, but I respect her strategy." Basically just endorsing her. But yeah, anyway, I got invited to debate her on GB News, and I would love to argue with Jane Claire Jones. Like, it would be good, but I just not going to do it on GB News and give them my credibility. But sorry, I'm kind of rambling a bit. But also, then when it comes to like the BBC just wants to frame this as like a two sides thing. They just want to be like, "Oh, here's a concerned cis woman, and here's a should we even trust this trans woman?" And you just kind of play into their little media narrative. So I don't know. That is half my reason, and the other half, perhaps a spicy admission, but I have talked about this a bit before, is the mainstream trans rights activist community has basically decided a boycott on debates, and I'd be kind of crossing a picket line if I did it. And I feel like I already am by doing my call-in show, and walking up to these gender critical spaces and arguing with them, but it's not quite the same as going on mainstream news.
Yeah.
I just don't know if in the end, I want trans people to have rights, and I want to end prejudice against trans people. And if me going on GB News and arguing with a fascist was the best way to do that, I'll do it. And I agree that isn't. But where the line is, like I agree that going on GB News and talking to Jane Claire Jones, it probably just would have benefited. Jane Claire Jones would have embarrassed herself. I would have lended my reputation to it, and GB News would have benefited. And the only people who would have watched it would have been gender criticals who said that I lost, regardless of what I said anyway. But going on BBC on if I was invited onto Radio 4 and they were like, debate Kathleen Stock, maybe their platform is big enough that would actually be a net win for us. Because I could, the most Radio 4 listeners, whatever, they already support Kathleen Stock, but most of them would have never heard a trans person before. And I could just get my voice out there. And that, I think, exposure and platforming trans people is probably the strongest thing we have. And I know I could do a decent job of it. So I don't know. I feel like I'm not entirely comfortable with the position that most people take. And I'm not saying that I know better than them, and I've respected it so far, but I don't know. I don't know if it's our best strategy.
Yeah. I feel like there's like two ways I can go with that. Maybe the first one. I'll do both. But you okay for time?
Yeah. I'll literally talk forever.
Cool. All right. So you don't really like formal debate, and you're probably not too keen about the GB News thing just because there's like too much at stake. But you like arguing with people. Why not online shit show Twitch debates or YouTube? Why are you not rolling around in the mud with the likes of I don't need to name any names, but yeah.
So I got invited to a few of these, and in fact I might be not that big. So I've gone for like smaller ones just because one of the things I hate about debates is this kind of like boxing attitude where they're like, your person's like gonna beat the other person. It's like, Katy Montgomerie versus, it's like lightning bolt or whatever. Like, I hate it all. It's all hype. It's all like two fan bases like squaring off against each other. Like, my team's gonna beat your team. I hate the competition side of it. So I've avoided the bigger ones because then all the fan bases come out. But I'm going on a podcast next week run by some anti-trans people. To I don't know. I've talked to them for a while, see where it goes. But in terms of like, the reason I don't like formal debates or just debates in general is that like you're both presented like on this kind of level with a neutral means centrist moderator or whatever, and they don't fucking know anything, and they're going to be more ready to listen to the valid concerns point than the person who says this person is an extremist who wants to wipe me out, because they're a centrist, and that's what centrists like to do.
Yeah,
they'll tone police and they'll say the word fuck and they'll decide that means I'm the worst one. But also then they can just gish gallop, and I just feel like gish gallop is just the OP strategy in debates, because they'll just say a load of claims. They'll just say, bone strength, trans people can't walk, and then like, regret, and most trans people die, and 80% detransition anyway, and like, mental illness. Like, whoa, you've just spewed out like 50 different claims. They're all completely bullshit. And in writing, you can give each one the right amount of time and provide a source. And when J.K. Rowling writes her bullshit essay, and then I write a counter essay addressing every single claim and providing a source, for at least some people, they're going to be like, J.K. Rowling doesn't have any sources. And when I click on Katy's sources, they're all pretty legit.
Yeah.
Some people will be won over by that. You just can't do that in live debate because, I mean, transphobe dickhead says 80% of trans people detransition anyway if trans kids. And I know where that statistic comes from. I could explain that. I could say, no, that's not actually true because, firstly, there's been like tens of studies and they all show that the detransition rate is like less than 1%. And the study that you're referring to is actually the catchment group for this wasn't people diagnosed with gender dysphoria. It was anyone that parents had a concern that they might be gay about. And so it included a load of cis people in the original group. And of course, most of them ended up not being trans because they weren't in the first place. I can make all these arguments, but like, it's just my word against their word, really, isn't it? And how convincing I am. It's like performance. And if I meet someone who's more charismatic than me, I'm sure they exist. They'll just they win because they say all their things faster and with more style. That's kind of why I don't. I mean, I'd like to trap someone in a logical trap, but when they're just spewing out fake facts, then I'm just kind of platforming them, really, aren't I?
Yeah,
That's my issue.
It's kind of difficult because even if because I always try to, no matter how crazy the person I'm talking to is, like I always try to just have something on display for like something that's logical or some like process that's like that the audience can see, right? I don't really want to just like bulldoze or bully or whatever. But I feel like there are some people that the only way you can get that is by handling a very like bad faith and like difficult person. So it's like, although it looks like posturing to like ask a question, they don't answer, and you're like, right, I'm just gonna ask you again. Like, yeah, like the babysitting thing. But yeah, it's kind of like in order to get a good faith discussion or like a logical argument, it's like you need to also do the like the kind of optical or bullying thing as well. Yeah, it's a really difficult thing to
Yeah,
bring
exactly.
together.
I mean, I don't. I don't mind. I'm not going to say I don't mind bullying people. I don't mind being disrespectful to an
Yeah.
idiot. Like I have no real issue with that. Um, and I don't like this kind of like, oh, I respect them and I don't hate anyone. No, I fucking hate lots of these people. And I think they're beneath me. Like in terms morally.
Mm.
I just think that's true. I think I can demonstrate that. And I'm not ashamed to say that. But I am aware that there's some optics to it, and if you come across too arrogant or too smug, then
Mm-hmm.
even if you're saying the right things, then you lose. So you've got to be careful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Sorry, I
very,
was just
very
thinking about
tedious.
how snarky I get in debates. It's a bad, really big problem. All right. Anyway, shit. Fuck. What was I gonna ask? I said that that thing could go two ways. Oh yeah, you said about
Oh,
how you don't agree with this strategy about of like the mainstream trans community when it comes to debates or like live appearances. I think I agree with you. Spicy question
that,
again.
that's because you're a debate bro like
Yeah,
me.
like I mean, like again, it's also because like I'll admit, like I've got like cis privilege, you know, like I'll like so
Oh,
it's quite easy for me to um like just have any discussion online with anyone about anything and not really feel like I'm letting anyone down, you know. And that's just how like I don't care, like I'll do discussions that are like that will always ultimately make me look bad because I just like doing it. But I know that's not the case for everyone.
humiliation fetish,
Um,
AGP, like evidence
Yeah,
number
yeah.
two.
Like even I mean, again, like yeah, even if it's like arguing with a fucking trans person about like genocide and all that, like there's no way I look good doing that debate optically, but I like to argue, so it's like I don't know, yeah. And
Yeah,
so
well,
I
maybe
just
me and
accept
you should
that.
have an argument.
Well, I was asked because you brought it up earlier. Did you want to talk? Like, I'm happy to like if you had like a take or I don't. Yeah,
On this
yeah.
topic.
Because you said that you were going to present it. That was one of your talks at one of the universities, right?
Oh, about the genocide
Yeah.
thing. Yeah, well, I mean, we can do this. Oh, do you want to finish your other thought and then come back to that
Oh yeah,
next?
the other one was when you said that you disagree with the mainstream community about the debate
Mm.
thing. Do you often worry about like backlash? Because it seems you're like quite popular from what I see. Like I don't
Um,
think I've ever seen you get in trouble. You know, like
I have got in trouble a few times.
okay,
I but and sometimes it's for me being clumsy, and in which case then I learn.
okay,
And I'll just do better and apologize. I don't mind it, I'm just trying to think of an example. So one time I was talking about sexuality and like there's this classic like the our genital preference is transphobic bullshit
yeah,
conversation.
yeah,
And I said something in like 300 tweets deep into some argument with 16 people, like throwaway comment at 4 a.m. or something. Um, and it was true, but it was very easy to misread the context. And I
mm,
woke up to a pylon, um, and it was actually the day that I lost the most followers in one go, 150,
yeah,
before Elon Musk's Twitter. Um,
yeah,
uh, and the issue there was that I was like shooting from the hip, being clumsy, and it was very easy. I think once I saw the alternate reading of my tweet, it was probably the first reading that a lot of people would have, and it
mm,
just came across as one of these like smug passing trans women like, oh well, I've had genital surgery, so and everyone else is, and it just kind of
yeah, okay,
kind of came across like that. And so I apologized to everyone who piled on and was like, this isn't what I intended, but it's my fault for writing it wrong. Here's what I actually meant. Here's an expansion of what I thought. And then I've learned going forward. So that, it sometimes happens, whatever. And I think that's good because if you slip up and someone corrects you, then I know the Twitter
mm,
correction machine is pretty brutal, and you make a mistake like that, and then I get a load of people saying that I'm transphobic and a TERF, and everyone should block me, and like
yeah,
that's just mad. But that's just what people are like, whatever. But I don't worry about it because if I'm wrong, like if I do say something transphobic, then I want to be corrected. But the same if I say something racist or sexist or homophobic or whatever. I want to be. I don't just want to go off being wrong still. And if I'm not wrong, then I kind of want to stand up to it. Because I want to stand for what I believe in. I don't ever want to chicken out and just go for like the mainstream position because that's what people say. And I think that's kind of what I've tried to do, and that is kind of my brand and why, like some of these mainstream pro-trans arguments that we've been calling out here, I don't want to seem like, oh, I'm better than all these other people. Like I hate that. I hate the trans people who position themselves as that, or I hate any minority that positions themselves as that. In anything like, oh yeah, all the mainstream people, I'm better than them. I'm not better than these people. But the reason why I will argue against these positions is because I just think they're not good.
Yeah.
And that can put you in danger of people not getting you. And I think that the reason that I am kind of have the position I do is because I think, at least reviewing myself, I think it's clear that I do actually care and that I am actually ready to listen and that I do have the best intentions. You know, you can see that from my output, I think. And maybe people disagree. But that means that I've seen before when I've said something and some people have come and they've been like, what the fuck is this? And then lots of my followers would be like, oh no, like, hear her out because I know this might not have been presented in the best way and she's usually really good. And then I can come in and add context. But maybe I've got a take in me that will get me cancelled by the trans community. And if that's the case and I'm right, then I'll just stick with it. And that will just be the end of my prestige or whatever the word is. And that's it. I mean, I'm not going to, I'm quite, I'm an atheist and an activist about that. I'm quite controversial, not controversial at all. I'm quite confrontational about it. And I know there are loads of Christian and other religious people who are pro LGBT rights. Like some of the people in the group chats I'm with are very religious, and I believe in like some level of religious freedom, whatever. I don't need to spin the conversation off into that, but I am aware that I sometimes say things and it might be kind of garbage for them, and maybe I'll get cancelled over some other thing. But like, whatever. I'm not going to back down. I'm not going to say that Christianity isn't misogynistic just because mainstream trans rights isn't picking a fight with Christianity. Like, fuck off. It is. I'm standing by that. So, yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
Cancel me if you need.
Yeah. Very interesting answer.
Genocide.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know if I'm. So again, you brought it up, all right. I'm just gonna. And I just thought I just had a feeling you wanted to talk about it. So yeah. Yeah. What's your spiel?
This is Lonerbox's brand, by the way. He just argues with trans people and says that their problems aren't real.
That's exactly what I do.
So I think that like with any of these words, there's obviously a range, like we were talking about before. There's no sort of kind of like strict definition of genocide, and we can pull up like the UN definite, like the classic argument I see a lot, and I've done before myself, is we can pick up the UN definition of genocide, and there's like 6 things. If it's one of these things, then it's genocide. And there's one that's like forcibly removing children from the group, and another one is like calculating some way of ending the existence of the group. And I think that like literally, we could say both of those things are happening to trans people in at least some states in the USA. And I would say that the both are the ultimate goal of the gender critical movement in the UK. Like a world without trans people is their goal. That doesn't, and I think when you say genocide, often the first thing people think of is like death camps and the historical Nazis and stuff. And we're not at that stage. We could get there. We were there before, but we're not even really we're closer than we've been before. But there's still a way to go before we get there. And maybe when you say that, oh, this is genocide, and they're like, what? Where's the death camps? And you're like, well, technically, actually, if they're then you're like, that's not really a good argument. But I think it's important to just show how extreme some of the legislation that at least in some states in the US, they're pushing for, um, taking children away from their parents, forcibly detransitioning them, and putting the parents in jail.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if that starts happening, how could we describe that without, like, under hyping how grim it is? Like, it's so fucking bleak.
Yeah.
Uh, the goal of this is to wipe trans people out. That's the goal of that legislation. I don't think you could say there's any other motivation behind that. There's no concern for any. There's nothing but the goal of wiping trans people out, and it is with the full, like, force of the state to start imprisoning people, and it, like, although maybe it's just one step in a genocide, I just don't think it's hyperbolic to point at things that extreme and say, if the trans person says this is a genocide against me, I'd be like, well, we could have an argument about whether it technically is, but the emotion that you're feeling and what you're attempting to describe and the laws that you're pointing at, I just don't think it's I don't think it's OTT.
Yeah, I think with what's so I think Texas is the main state where they tried to do that thing with, like, the investigations into parents. As far as I know now, thankfully, it's probably going to be so unconstitutional that it's just like it's been. I think so far it's been blocked. Like, the investigations are blocked against, like, 13 families, something like 13 families. But yeah, like, I've even said, like, if there's any world where even one state succeeds in taking a kid away from their parents to, like, put them into some conversion therapy center or whatever, it's like, I mean, that doesn't fit that's not the UN definition of genocide, but, like, in history we've spoken about people doing that to indigenous people and we describe that as genocide. So yeah, I've always, like, my position has usually been, like, just describing it as ongoing, or, like, saying other people should call it that was the problem. But yeah, like, I mean, the fact that it could get there is really, or that they're trying to, is, like,
it's horrifying. And like in the UK, if you said, oh, they're doing a genocide against trans people in the UK, I mean, they aren't. That's I think that's the realm of hyperbolic. But to say that the gender critical movement, or many members of the gender critical movement, want to do one, that isn't hype. That's just true. Like, that there are lots of them who have said that they want a world without trans people, or that I mean, lots of them, just piecing it together, they want special prisons just for trans people. They want to make it illegal for trans people to exist in society, and they want to create a world without trans people. Like,
was it Helen Joyce who actually, she was the one who actually just said word for word, like, she wants to, like, eradicate transness? Was it her, or?
You need to be very careful with Helen Joyce and a few others, because they have a lot of money, a lot of institutional power, and they will threaten to sue absolutely anyone and everyone.
Right.
She's threatened to sue. Like, I don't know the edge of this, and I've been threatened. I've had people threaten to sue me over this before, and it was very stressful. Not just threaten, but, like, raise a load of money and send lawyers letters and all this kind of stuff.
Oh.
And it's yeah, so I'm overly careful around this topic, but I mean, it is true to say she has made legal threats against trans people for giving their opinion on her beliefs, as she said them, and what that constitutes. But what she did say, one of the things that she got into sort of legal threat world over, was she did a oh, am I still on your thing? Mine's frozen.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry. One of the things that she got into that kind of area over, she did an interview with Helen Stanaland, who is a different Helen, gender critical, and she said that she wants to reduce the number of trans people, because all trans people, including happily transitioned trans people, are a huge problem to a sane world.
Yeah, okay.
You can look up her exact quote. So that's pretty bad. She also works for Sex Matters, and I can't remember exactly who's in Sex Matters now, but at least some of the people in that have signed the WDI declaration, and WDI is another gender critical group, and they've called for the elimination of transgenderism. and also like some other famous gender criticals like Janice Raymond called to morally mandate transsexualism out of existence. So there's quite a few of them who have literally, called for this world without trans people kind of situation. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how much you've known about the discourse, but yeah, like I've kind of said, like, yeah, it's probably okay to describe like people who say that as like genocidal people, right? Like, because even if they're not doing it, it's like, what's the logical conclusion of believing that,
Yeah, well, I think the logical conclusion of gender criticalism is a world without trans people, and the only way you can achieve that is through imprisoning, forced conversion therapy, and extreme punishment, and like that's the inevitable conclusion. But I'm always wary. I don't know. Scotland has similar but slightly different laws. But if I was American, I would be saying I'd be more open about this because I would be allowed to say what I actually believed.
Oh, really?
Yeah, well, just like I just feel like you are open to legal threats, and
Yeah.
they have a lot of money. The press would fucking love it. They would crowdfund. Like, before I've had a situation where someone crowdfunded a load of money. And it's just very stressful because, I mean, maybe I could crowdfund a load of money, but I don't want to. I don't want to take money off the community to fight some fucking garbage legal battle, and I don't want to go to court and waste all my time. Like, I have a job and a life, and it would be very stressful, and I don't trust the courts. Like, I mean, so what if I say, oh, this person is transphobic or this person is genocidal, and then the court's like, well, that was a claim and you can't demonstrate it. I'll be like, well, it's factually true, but I mean, what if the court's transphobic? What if the judge is transphobic? Then you're just fucked. Like, these court cases cost like 6 figures plus. I don't want to be spending the rest of my life paying off some debt to some transphobic loser who wants to wipe me out just because I described them the wrong way on a stream of 169 nice people watching. So I think it is worth being careful. So please do go and look up the Helen Joyce quote.
Yeah, that's okay. Listen. I have no opinions on Helen Joyce. Okay, there we go. Like, we're talking about a hypothetical human who says those things. Okay.
I think Helen Joyce is a dickhead and a coward.
Yeah.
I think that's my opinion.
I mean, it's like, like defamation laws in the UK are fucking horrible as well. I think they've gotten a bit better in Scotland. Like, now in Scotland, at least, you don't you have to prove damages. You used to not have to. I think England did that quicker than Scotland. Scotland was behind on that.
Really?
Yeah, we were only.
That's rare.
Yeah, because a YouTuber threatened to sue me for defamation over a tweet once, and the letter arrived. The letter arrived like 2 weeks after the law changed. So I was like, "Fuck you, mate! Like, you've just wasted your money." I'm like, "Fuck off." The tweet's still up. Like, yeah.
Oh, good. Because I think the problem about having to show damages is like, maybe, but like maybe you can. I don't know. Like, the thing is, if you have enough money, you can do anything, can't you?
Yeah. But it's like 4 or 5, like 5 figures, right? Like,
well, Alison Bailey raised £500,000 to chase a conspiracy theory against Stonewall. The judge said was mad. Like, they have so much money.
Yeah.
And lots of them don't like me. Maybe I'm over-egging myself, but I saw how much money they raised before, so just makes me wary. Don't like the stress.
Yeah, we'll get out of this dangerous territory. I think I've got like 2 more questions.
Yeah.
You seem to get quite a lot of abuse online. I don't think I've ever seen you visibly fazed by it. Are you, or how do you cope?
Yeah, so I think the reason, so I'm thinking about this more, especially now we've got Elon in control of Twitter. I don't want to block people just for abuse because I like arguing with them, and I don't want to create like an echo chamber. I want to see what they're up to. Like, I don't judge anyone else. If you block abuse targeted at you or even targeted at me or anything, totally fine. There's no judgment there at all. That is the sane, sensible, mentally healthy thing to do. And I don't, for a number of reasons. And I used to have a I don't block anyone policy, but when you start getting stalkers and things, you just have to and start getting people posting, like porn and stuff in your mentions. I'm not having that. So I've created a few rules when I block people. But if they're just going to call me like a man or something, then it's just weak. Like I just dunk on them back and then ignore it. But I think there's an important line between I like standing up to this stuff and showing that it like they have nothing. They got no arguments, and I think that's good to show to other trans people. Pardon me, and also cis people watching. They're like they just have nothing. Once you face up to what they're saying, it's pathetic. It's like what a child would say to you. But if you allow too much abuse, it can look like everything you say gets absolutely destroyed just because of the numbers.
Yeah.
So you want to keep it so the optics of it is good, I guess, just for other trans people watching. I don't want to make it look like every time I speak up, I get 500 people piling on me and only like 3 supportive comments. So, yeah, we'll see how that goes as more Nazis come onto Twitter. But in terms of getting phased by it, like, there are things I do get phased by, but it's not really the abuse. I get phased when, like, for example, when healthcare for trans kids was blocked in the UK, like, that was one of the worst days of my life. It was absolutely horrific because I knew so many families and like I empathizing with the children and like that's fucking horrific. Absolutely broke me for days.
Yeah.
But someone just calling me names or something, that's not a big deal. But when the abuse has kind of got to me. Like one time I was worrying about my healthcare and talking about how what happens if I encounter someone who doesn't even believe that trans women can get breast cancer. And I want a mammogram and they refuse to do it. That's terrifying. And then someone wrote a letter to Graham Linehan saying that I was gloating about being able to have breast cancer because I'm a sick fetishist, whatever. That got to me a bit just because it's so dehumanizing. It's so like inhuman. And it was just a level that I hadn't really encountered before, where they think that they think trans people are so like subhuman that they would gloat about having cancer. Like it just to just see yourself through someone else's eyes like that. That was a bit of a weird situation. And another one is I've stopped talking about times that I've been sexually assaulted, or my friends have been, because when the gender critical people turn up and tell you that it was your fault and you enjoyed it and all this kind of stuff, that is too much for me. But in like the general abuse, the reason it doesn't affect me, my way of coping with it, is it's like irrational bullshit, and I've rationalized past it. Like if how I often think of it and how I try and explain it to other trans people is pick something about you which you didn't choose, which isn't controversial in society. Like I have brown hair.
Yeah.
Just imagine if you stumbled across this like Reddit subforum or like spin-off of Kiwi Farms or something, and there was this fucking cult with like 10,000 people, and they fucking hated people with brown hair, and that was like all they posted about 24/7. That was their entire life. You had these like micro celebrities in there who just hated people with brown hair even more. They were calling for like genocides against people with brown hair. Like, what would you think about that? Like, would you start doubting yourself, your position in society? Would you feel like, oh, maybe my brown hair is a bad thing? Or would you be like, these people are fucking mental? Like, this is so irrational and garbage. If you were walking down the street and someone come up to you and were like, ugh, blue eyes, what's wrong with you? You'd just be like, what? Like, what are you talking about? Like, I just think this just reflects badly on you and no one else. And there's no reason why being trans is any different to that. Like, imagine someone hating on you for being right-handed. Like, why is that any different to someone hating on you for being trans? It isn't. And I know emotionally they're very different because we've grown up in a society that devalues trans people. But when you realize that rationally these are the same category of thing, the emotions you feel from it, you can confront them, and every time you start feeling bad, you're like, oh, maybe I am bad for being trans. Maybe trans people are worth less. Maybe it is my fault or whatever. No, because would I be thinking this about someone who hates people with an even number of teeth? Like,
Yeah.
no, I wouldn't. I would be like, this person is a fucking idiot. Their opinion is literally worthless to me because what they're saying is irrational and it's not based on any facts. So now I've just thought about that enough, and I knew I could do this because when I was first realizing I was an atheist, first like coming out to myself as an atheist, I was really insecure about it. And when people dissed atheists, I felt like I needed to defend it, and I got upset about it. And the same with being a metalhead, which is kind of a bit more cringe maybe, but when people said metal was shit when I was like 14, I needed to argue with them. Like they were wrong and they were, this is like affecting my identity and stuff. I do not care now. If I was the only person on earth who liked metal, I would be the only person on earth who was right. Like, don't care.
Yeah.
Like, if you think metal is just noise, people screaming, like, you are just inferior. Like, that's fine with me. And I'm not. That's kind of an exaggeration, but like, there's no difference. And I'd already dealt with this, and I knew that in my mind, emotionally, I could get being trans to the same position, and I have. Pretty much 99% or more, I think now, pretty much there. And so, yeah, most of it doesn't faze me. And some of the threats do. Stalkers do. They're a bit scary, and it's the oppression that gets to me. Like, maybe I won't have a future in this country. That's what is the most upsetting for me, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Is there any difference in weight when it's criticism coming from the right or the left?
Not really right or left. It's more frustrating when an organization that you think is good is is like taking on board suggestions. So like the Liberal Democrats have been fairly pro-trans and they aren't the Conservatives. I mean, they're kind of they've been billing themselves as pro-LGBT for a while, ever since they got rid of what's his face, Tim Farron, or
Yeah.
can't remember his name.
The Christian guy, yeah.
Yeah, and then they had some discussion and they decided that misgendering wasn't transphobia or something. That was, I know Liberal Democrats aren't really left wing. Maybe a better example is the Green Party, or like when you get some trade union or something, and they come out with something garbage. It's more frustrating because it's like, you are generally good at this and you've slipped up here, and why didn't you listen, and why aren't you paying attention to trans people? Why are you just listening to a load of gender critical extremists? Like, it's just very annoying. But like, if it's abuse coming from them, they're just as bad as, like, they're just shitheads, and on there I don't really care. Like, but when it comes from trans people, I think it's worse. That's maybe this is how I see in groups and out groups. I don't know, but like, if it's someone I consider, or feminists, when it comes from feminists, it's worse, because I just take what they say with a lot more weight. Like, you can be left wing and like strongly anti-LGBT. There are quite a lot of them. There are whole like little subcults of whatever. I don't want to say any in case I set any off, but like, there are subgroups of leftists online who are virulently anti-LGBT. And so when I just discover someone like that, I'm like, well, I already know they exist. They're just an idiot. They're not politically aligned with me just because they're, acting out some left-wing positions. But when it's like a trans rights activist, a gay rights activist, or a feminist, I feel like we are natural allies. We agree on everything. Like, what is this? I must be wrong. I must seriously reconsider my position. So
Yeah. I think even with, I don't even know if Democrats really have that problem in America, because I think if you're a Democrat, you're probably going to lean towards the pro-trans position almost by default. But in the
yeah,
UK, Keir Starmer is sitting there worrying about what fucking Mumsnet thinks about him, you know? Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I feel
Well,
like it's a lot
Keir
harder to
Starmer's
get you.
like
Yeah.
centre right, I guess, isn't he? But like,
Yeah.
yeah, and the Labour Party is a good example, and it is kind of scary. But I think that I know that there's like a right wing faction to the Labour Party, and I know they kind of have a lot of power at the moment. I just don't, if they are disagreeing with me, then I'm either wrong or they're wrong. That's kind of how I see it. And if I'm wrong, then I'm learning. And if they're wrong, then they're the same as someone else who's wrong. Like, but what's scary about Labour is hopefully they'll be the next government. And if Keir Starmer gives in to the Rosie Duffield crew, then it won't be any different for trans people when the Conservatives and Labour switch. And I'm hoping that when we switch to Labour, it will become less bleak. Not it will stop being bleak, but the negative, like hype train will lose momentum.
Yeah.
And it won't if Rosie Duffield's sub faction gets the power. So
yeah, because I do feel like at the very least, there are groups like Momentum and like the youth vote is probably I think there's a few factors that could hopefully keep that away, but fuck it. I mean, we don't get to find out for a good while, do we? You said something.
bring on the next scandal.
Yeah, you said something earlier on there actually that made me bring me to the last question. Do you still play Children of Bodom covers on the guitar? I haven't seen one for a while.
Yeah, I haven't played a guitar as much as I usually do, because it has been summer. Summer's long gone now, but I play less in summer because I'm outside all the time. Also just been like mad busy. I want to do more guitar stuff. Another thing that I've been waiting off on is, so I've got a whole album written, with my metal band Dehumanor. Everyone should check them out. We're on everything. And I need to start recording that. And we've had some delays in that for internal band reasons, but we're making progress on that. So I'm going to start playing guitar more on that. And also, Turf Wars is going to come back, and that's been delayed for reasons. Which is my main flagship show. For anyone who doesn't know, it's going to be on my YouTube channel, and I'm going to do some guitar things for that. So I need to get back into guitar, but I just haven't had that thing pull me back in.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've learned a bunch of Children of Bodom songs, and I should do more. I've learned all of oh shit, what's it called? I can't remember what the song's called. But like a much harder one than I've uploaded a cover for. But to do the perfect take, like I get a proper red light syndrome for guitar, which is like where I'm playing it perfectly and then I press record and then I can't play it at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, got some. I like guitar. I wanted to do recording because I did a metal cover of a Christmas song a while ago, and I've written another one, and I just need to like record and perform it. And I was gonna do it for last Christmas, and I hate editing videos. It just takes so long. So
yeah, yeah, same. Yeah, it's why I kind of try to stream a bit more now. Yeah.
Do you play guitar?
Yeah. I used to play classical, like in bands. Like I play. I used to play a lot of metal when I was really young, but these days I play most of my instruments like a songwriter. Like because I do like a what would you even call it? Just like I do like recording and production by myself. So I play the drums, then the bass, then the guitar, then the vocals, then the keys, and then just put it all together myself. And sometimes try to mix it as well. I haven't done that for a wee while though, but. Yeah, I do. I used to play classical guitar in like bars and restaurants for a job when I was younger.
Really? Oh, yeah. That's cool.
That was probably like the one instrument I actually played like well. The other ones I just like, a song needs drums, I'll just do like a basic thing, and then same with guitar, bass, and keys. So yeah.
Oh, we should do a shred battle.
I'm not winning a fucking shred battle, but okay. I mean, yeah. If you want to, I don't know, like the thing like in wrestling where the Rock like fights a dwarf, then sure, go for it. What all right. What's your favorite band, they're asking?
Oh, I have a Last FM if you want to see the plays. And so my Last FM is completely Katy. I think I don't know why my download internet is being slow, but I think it's really hard to say a top one. Maybe I'll go with Test the Hero, Dragon Force, Iron Maiden, Symphony X, Helveti, Creator, Municipal Waste. Those kind of bands.
Cool. Okay. I think that was the last question I had.
Oh, wicked.
Do you want to shout yourself out? I saw that you're. If I had a few more viewers, we could have got you to 15K subs on YouTube, but that's probably a bit optimistic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I have a YouTube, Katy Montgomerie, and hopefully my weekly show is going to come back, and that should be quite fun. We just like go through transphobic bullshit and demolish it and laugh at it. I also have another YouTube show which is called The Transatlantic Call-In Show, and if you've been listening to this and been like, I really want to argue with Katy, then that is where you can do it. It's a weekly call-in show. It's not always me, but there's a panel of like rotating hosts of trans people, and you can just call in and you can ask anything you want. And as long as you're not like, you know, doing a proper spicy call for action against us, we take transphobes. We prioritize transphobic callers. So yeah, that's cool. If you want to call in, you can also. Although I got big on Twitter, you know, Twitter's dying. So I just started a Mastodon, and I've got my own Mastodon instance. If you want to come follow me on Mastodon, I'm at Katy Montgomerie at katy.media. My cat also has an account on there, and my cartoons are going to be on there. Or you can find me on Twitter if you're an Elon fanboy at Katy Montgomerie. What else do I have? Then I got Tumblr. I haven't really
Oh God,
clicked
I'm
with
not making your
Tumblr yet.
time. Yeah, I'm trying to link all these as quickly as possible. Oh God.
But yeah, so I've got a few things basically on the internet. Oh, if you want to read long form arguments, I have my own website, katymontgomerie.com,
Mm-hmm.
and I also have a Medium. Sorry, I'm spamming these out, which is also just Katy Montgomerie. And on there, I've written a load of like arguments for trans rights with sources laid out, like formal logical arguments and stuff. If you are interested in a bit more of a deep dive on things, and I've got a TikTok. There you go. That's all my things.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I got most of those out, so we're all
Nah.
good. Okay. Well,
Wicked.
I've really
Yeah.
enjoyed
Thanks for
having you
having
on,
me.
and
Thanks.
yeah,
Thanks for letting me rant. I feel like I said 99% of the words on this stream.
listen, that was the entire plan. Okay.
Okay,
Go
that's
for it.
good.
All right.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Nice to meet you all, chat. See you in the future. And yeah, cool. See you around.
Yeah, I'll speak to
Bye.
you soon. All right. Bye bye. Boof. All right. Oh, whoa. What the heck is going on around here? That was nice. That was nice. Thanks, chat. Really appreciate that. Cross Astronomy, thanks for the 100 bits.